Okay, let's talk human evolution, or rather, human degradation. And I wrote a blog all about this. It's going to be far more detailed than this video. I'm going to try to keep it short, sweet, and to the point. Of course, I've said before, I'm a better writer than I am a speaker, so that is why, if you're interested in this subject, it's always best to read the blogs. There's always far more detail. But I will give this a go, give this a best explanation I can. So, what I mean by human degradation is that I don't actually believe that humanity is evolving over the years. I don't think we've been evolving for some time. I realize that does depend entirely on your definition of evolve. While I do think we are adapting and changing and have been throughout history, I don't think it's necessarily evolution in the sense of how a lot of people, especially scientists, have said, we have become more intelligent, we have become an advanced species, we've become a superior species to our ancestors. I don't think that's the case. I don't think we're more intelligent or more advanced than our ancestors. I don't think, genetically speaking, we are superior to our ancestors. I do think we are different, we are ever changing, and change in and of itself is evolution, to change and become something new and different. However, just because something is new and different doesn't mean it's an improvement upon the previous species. And therein lies my argument. And the reason I don't think we are an improvement is because we haven't had any new genetic information for millennia. So think back to what the world was like prior to Homo sapiens being the last remaining species on the planet, at least the last remaining hominid species. We had a sort of Tolkien-like world. We had Homo denisovans, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Homo luzonensis, Homo floresiensis, Homo everybody. We had a lot of the Pithecus as well. We had so many variations in bipedal hominid species that were able to actually breed with one another and produce offspring, seemingly viable offspring. We had hybridization. It used to be believed that these species, these older hominids, couldn't really produce offspring, and then they found that actually, yes, Neanderthal and Homo sapien could produce offspring, did produce offspring. We have the remnants of these previous humans in our DNA. However, something happened, I think they say approximately 40,000 years ago, and it nearly wiped out our entire existence, in that it wiped out all the other hominid species and just left us, the hybrid species, Homo sapien, which in our arrogance we have named Homo sapien sapien, as in naming ourselves twice wise. That in and of itself is proof of the opposite. We are arrogant, we are ignorant, and we haven't had any new DNA, per se, since everybody else was wiped out. And this is where I make the argument, because when that occurred, Homo sapien almost didn't make it either. There was only a handful left on the entire planet. So really, we are all related. We do have an Adam and Eve sort of story, and we have been an inbreeding family, if you will, for thousands of years, which, if you know anything about genetics and the problem with relatives that are too closely related producing offspring, there can be genetic drawbacks. So what I am saying is, I don't think we have improved over the years. I think due to genetic degradation a lack of new genetic information, and overall, like on a grander scale, if you will, the same family inbreeding for too many generations, we have actually become inferior to what our ancestors may have been. All of our various ancestors. So, although there are benefits to hybrid species, and perhaps we were at our peak when we were a fresh hybrid species, like we know that purebred species tend to have issues with their immune systems, tend to have more ailments and illnesses, whereas a hybrid species typically turns out healthier and has benefits from both genetic sources, has new DNA, fresh DNA, all kinds of potential. And so what I am saying is, way back when we had a bunch of hybridization going on, because we had multiple species of hominid, multiple human species interacting and breeding with one another, we had great potential. And we were probably at our height of evolution, probably at our most advanced. That might be why we were capable of creating those megalithic structures and all the mysterious wonders of the world that we can't replicate today. But now, in this day and age, we have been inbred for so long, we really need a new genetic source. Our DNA is probably no longer as fresh and as capable of interbreeding with one another and producing healthy offspring. Hence the problems we're seeing. And honestly, if you studied the history of the pharaohs of Egypt, you know there was a lot of inbreeding within the pharaoh's family, and it caused some genetic issues, some deformities, things like that. So we do know that there is a danger of when you have too much inbreeding within a family, being passed on generation after generation. There's clearly genetic degradation happening there. So when you consider 40,000, give or take, maybe more, years of inbreeding, of Homo sapien inbreeding, really, at this point, we are all so closely related. I don't care if you think that you're only this type of person, like say you think you only have the DNA of, say you think you're only German and something, and you think it would be safe to produce an offspring with someone who is of a different ancestry, seemingly a different ancestry. We put way too much stock into race and what country someone's from without really considering, genetically speaking, we're all Homo sapien. We've all been Homo sapien for 40,000 plus years. So there's no way that we're not related. And if we're all related and have been related all these years and continually passing on our genetic information, well, at this point, I think we have, at the very least, plateaued. I don't think we can, in any way, shape, or form, progress. And that's the problem. That's where I say I don't think we are evolving. I actually think we plateaued a long time ago, during the time where there were just all of these different hominid species existing on the planet at the same time, overlapping and interbreeding, and we had all this hybridization. That is why I say that it was probably the height of our evolution, because we just had so many different species and so much genetic information. And again, I don't think, anybody who's read my book knows from my auger plate chapter, that I don't think that these were branches off the same ancestors. I don't think we had a common ancestor and then branched out into all these others and made our way all over the planet. No, I think that parallel lines of evolution occurred on the planet, like an auger plate. You take a swab and you make an auger plate, and you have a colony growing here and a colony growing here and a colony growing there, and they may all be the same or similar colonies, but they're genetically different, or like they may all be something. You may have 3 different types of fungus growing, but they're all fungus. So that's more or less what I think happened here on Earth. I think we had the same sort of ingredients on the planet, and so very similar species. We had parallel evolution occurring on the planet, which is how some species wound up isolated. And I do think that as the various colonies spread, they encountered one another, and then we had hybridization. I don't think we had a common ancestor. I think all of those different ancestors have a common descendant, us. But we have been interbreeding now for so long that the DNA is damaged, it's compromised, it's degraded, we're not improving, we're not evolving. And I think we're just about at our limit. So if you ever wonder why people today are so crazy, well, in general, that might actually explain mental illness. We may be seeing more cases of dementia at earlier ages, and more cases of autism, and more cases of ADHD and OCD and all these other different things, bipolar, schizophrenia. We know schizophrenia did afflict the ancient Egyptians. It may be due to genetic degradation. It may be due to the fact that there is no new genetic information coming in. Now, theoretically, new genetic information falls to Earth in the form of viruses from space, and we may be bringing new information into our bodies, new genetic information, in the form of viruses and microbials when we get sick, and it alters our DNA slightly. So there may still be some changes going on and some mild evolution, but ultimately, I think the species is suffering genetic degradation and a lack of diversity. Geneticists tend to study a lack of diversity in species, because if species are too similar, there's not enough diversity in a species, and they get hit with something that they're particularly susceptible to, that's it, that species is gone. So I think we're getting there, and I think this is something to be concerned about. I don't think that the technology that we create today is proof or even evidence of superiority or evolution. If anything, I think it's proof of the opposite. When you consider that the technology we create today is inferior in the sense that, look at the waste that is produced from the technology we create. Look at the damage it causes to the planet. Look at the damage it causes to ourselves. Our ancient ancestors created marvelous megalithic structures without all the pollution and all the waste and all the damage, without all the radiation, without the poison. We can't do that. We're not doing that. We're creating technology that is harmful to the environment, to ourselves. So I make quite a clear argument. Obviously, I'm a little less objective about this argument. This is a personal opinion, and I can provide objective observations to back my personal opinion, and I do so in the blog. But clearly, I personally believe that we are not evolving anymore and that we are not superior to our ancestors. So I just feel the need to separate, personal opinion versus the objectivity. Typically, I'm very objective about these arguments, or at least about the blogs I write, but I do share my personal thoughts and opinions. They are theories, after all, they're my personal theories, but I do present a lot of objective arguments for this personal theory in the blog, so do check that out. Also, another problem with today, modern day humans, we have been so dependent on technology for so long. We are exposing the youth, we're exposing children and infants to the blue light of technology. It is causing eye strain and brain strain. It is causing damage within the brain. Honestly, I think really there's a danger to living in the technology age, a danger of having the brain atrophy due to the exposure to the technology. So that is another thing to consider. And on top of that, we live in the post-nuclear era. So we're still suffering. It may not seem like it, nearly 100 years after the fact, but we are still suffering the effects of our own arrogance, of having polluted our planet, of having created nuclear weapons and then having used them on one another, having put that into the atmosphere. I think we are nearing our end. I think human beings, at least current human beings, Homo sapiens, in this day and age, we are approaching our next extinction event, our end, and we have done a good bit of it to ourselves, quite a lot of it recently. So I do not think that we are an evolved superior species. And I make quite an argument for it in a great deal of detail in my blog. So give that a read, give that a like, give that a share. You know the drill. And stay extra, my fellow terrestrials.